Hey guys, what's going on? Happy Friday. It is a happy Friday indeed. It's funny because you get back to work, middle of the week, New Year's, and then all of a sudden it's the weekend again.
Yeah,
And this week was a weird one because, not only, we had a lot of things going on in the NFL, obviously, but like not only that, like we didn't talk about week 18 much. That's what we're gonna
no,
do in this podcast. We got a lot to talk about. Um, we did get some very positive news on Damar Hamlin yesterday. Carrie Elam said that Hamlin was awake. The doctors had a mini virtual press conference and said that he was responsive and he is neurologically intact. Apparently, he has movement in his arms, in his hands, and his feet. And the doctors said that all cylinders in his brain seem to be firing. So, all amazing news. We're hoping to continue to hear more good news as he makes progress. Hopefully, out of the ICU at some point. That's the hope. But it's crazy because the doctors said that when he woke up, obviously he can't speak yet because he has the breathing tube in, but
right.
he wrote down on a piece of paper. He said, "Did we win?" So that's
Yeah. So
where his priorities were.
that's crazy to me too, because like the fact that he would remember that where he went out, like that's just an interesting thing to me. Like I don't know anything about how the brain works or that kind of stuff. I'm definitely not a doctor. We make jokes about Dr. Rizzuto, Dr. Siddiqui on this podcast a lot, but that's it for football injuries. But this type of injury, I can't believe you remember that. The first thing that he wakes up and that's what comes to mind. Like that's just crazy. I couldn't believe that. Really, obviously, like you said, good news with Damar Hamlin. They said, yeah, they said that he did that in writing because he has a breathing tube. I wonder what he's thinking. He's probably seen all the donations that have come in, right? Like,
I don't know if
obviously,
he
he can't
has yet.
react,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they told him. Like
right?
I don't know what they told him yet. Like I'm not sure if they wanted to overwhelm him with all the stuff that has been going on yet. Um,
Hmm.
they probably want to keep it simple. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's like the doctors did respond to his question and said that yes, he did win and that he won the game of life, right? Which is
Yeah,
an amazing response to an amazing question. But it's true, man. It's really this is the news that we wanted to hear. Going
yeah,
into the week 18 games. I'm sure that's a sigh of relief, in term for all football players, right? Around the
hmm,
country, just you know, hopefully, hoping that something more tragic, really could have happened, and hopefully everything so far is looking pretty positive for
yeah.
him and his
It,
future. So we're gonna continue to keep him in our thoughts.
yeah, obviously. And then, I'm not sure how this would work. It's the obviously the way that we're keeping him in a prison, we're doing that. But I think that with him coming back, I just completely lost my train of thought. I can't believe that happened. It was gone. I had it the whole time you were talking, and then I completely lost what I was going to
So
say.
while you remember what you were going to say, Ian Rappaport just tweeted, and Albert right here, who's live with us in our chat, he prompted me to look for it. But Ian Rappaport just tweeted out and said that Damar Hamlin is addressing the team via FaceTime. The breathing tube is out, and he spent the morning speaking to various teammates on FaceTime.
Is
And
that
now
just now?
now, yep, 6 minutes ago, and now he's delivering a message to the entire group. That's what Ian Rappaport just tweeted. That is
Yeah,
crazy, dude. That is
right.
amazing, man.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what
Unbelievable.
that came back. Yeah, so that's awesome news, obviously. But just like it's so nice that he did this. This is like best case scenario. It sounds like now at this point. Even before that, I was gonna say it was best case scenario, but that's like best case scenario because now he's talking, and
Yeah, dude.
obviously we want him to get healthy and all that. It would have been a lot less fun, this weekend and going into the playoffs if we had this cloud hanging over the NFL. The players might not have been as excited to play. It could have dampened things a lot if this didn't go the way it did. So
For
it's awesome
sure.
news to hear that he's best case scenario for him and just for everyone else in general. Obviously, we've all been praying for him. So that's awesome.
The Bills, team probably pumped now, and they're just like,
Yeah.
wow, like we got our guy back, and going into this weekend, it's going to be way easier, for them to focus, right? Like I'm sure this
Yeah.
week has been extremely hard on them. Bengals too, because they were on the field with these guys, right? And they were on the field
Yeah.
with in that whole situation. Um, So yeah, this is just great. That's great.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
Great way to start the podcast. That's awesome, man. Thanks, Albert,
That's
for
good
pointing
news.
that out to us in the chat, so we can talk about it live on the pod. Um, so the NFL, they've ruled that they will not be resuming the Bills Bengals game.
Right.
And just to explain the top seed scenarios coming into last week, right? So if the Bills beat the Chiefs, I'm sorry, if the Bills um, beat the
Beat the
Bengals on Monday
Bengals.
night, right? Like let's say that game played out. They
Right.
would have been tied with the Chiefs for the best record in the AFC. And the Bills held the tiebreaker there between both of those teams, right? And
Yeah.
is with them and the Chiefs as well. In case like them and the Chiefs finished the season with the same record at the top of the AFC, in that scenario, the Bills would have owned the number one seed, and that's
Via
because
head
the
to head.
Bills beat.
Right.
Yeah, the head to head. The Bills beat the Chiefs earlier this year. Now, the Bengals were one game behind both the Chiefs and the Bills. So if the Bengals beat the Bills on Monday night, and then the Chiefs would have lost this weekend, then the three teams would have had the same record. And the
Yeah.
Bengals, they beat the Chiefs and the Bills this year, so they would have gone all the way up to the number one seed in the AFC. But
Right.
all that is not happening anymore. Bills Bengals was declared a no contest, and the Bengals have been named AFC North champions because regardless of the outcome of this week's game against the Ravens, they will have a higher win percentage. Okay.
Right.
Now, if the Ravens win this game against the Bengals this week, and if they end up playing the Bengals in the wild card round again, if they're the sixth seed, the NFL is going to determine where they end up playing, whether that's in Cincinnati or whether that's in Baltimore. That'll be based on a coin flip. And that's basically because the Ravens didn't have a chance to win the AFC North.
Right.
Right. So they're kind of, given the edge to the Ravens here. They're given the title to the Bengals, and any any of the wild card teams outside of the Ravens, if they end up playing the Bengals, it will be in Cincinnati. But between these two teams, if they end up playing wild card weekend, that will be the only scenario where they would do a coin flip to determine where they end up playing between those two cities.
Right. So essentially what it boils down to is the Ravens are pretty much playing for a 50-50 shot at hosting the wild card game. And that's where it goes with that. And then the Bengals, they need to win to have a chance at a neutral site, one seed, AFC championship game if they would make it to that. Correct. Because if the Bills and the Chiefs both win, it's just the Bills and the Chiefs that would go to a neutral site if that would be the AFC championship matchup. If the Bills and Chiefs would lose and the Ravens would win, that would qualify the Bengals, right? Because no, if the Ravens would win, it would still be just the Bills and the Chiefs as the AFC championship matchup, the potential AFC championship matchup at a neutral site. But if the Ravens lose and the Bills and Chiefs win, or if they lose, I think it's win. As long as if the Bengals win, they will be in the mix for a neutral site AFC championship game. That's how it works, right? Regardless of who the matchup is. If it's the Bills or the Chiefs playing the Bengals, it could be a neutral site AFC championship matchup, but that's only if the Bengals win this week. So they're playing for a chance for a neutral site AFC championship matchup. And then the wild card matchup for the Ravens could be a 50-50 home game for them if they win this week against the Bengals. So there's a lot on the line for both of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of reasons the Bengals are potentially getting screwed here a little bit. If they take care of the Ravens this week, which they should, they'll get their home game in the wild card round, right?
Yeah.
But they also have no shot at the one seed now, and they would get the two seed if the Bills lose. If the Bengals win, right, and the Bills lose, they would get the two seed. Okay. Now, since the Chiefs, Bills, and going back to the Ravens real quick, if the Chargers lose, because the Chargers are in the fifth seed right now, the Ravens are in the sixth seed right now. If the Chargers lose and the Ravens win, the Ravens go up to the fifth seed, and you don't have to worry about any neutral site between the Bengals and the Ravens because they wouldn't play each other in the wild card in the wild card round. Now, since the Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals were all vying for that one spot, like you were alluding to, depending on how the games go this weekend, they could potentially see each other in the AFC Championship, right? Now, the owners are going to vote today on which scenarios are the best options for neutral sites for a potential AFC Championship game between the Chiefs and the Bills, and they're going to do that vote today. So, if Buffalo and Kansas City both win, and they're in the AFC Championship, the proposal would be that if the Bills and Chiefs ended up with the same record, the Bills would have had home field advantage. If the Chiefs and Bills both lose and the Bengals win, if either the Bills or the Bengals make it to the championship game against the Chiefs, it would be at a neutral site. If the Bills and Chiefs both win this week, the Chiefs get the bye. Right? If the Chiefs lose and the Bills win, the Bills get the bye. And we don't have to worry about any neutral site situation for the AFC Championship if that's the case. I hope that's a lot.
There's
a lot of information.
A lot of moving parts.
But
and a lot of things can happen where none of this
I hope that makes sense.
There's a lot of things that can happen where none of this even occurs. Like we said about the Ravens, they could jump in the 5 seed and then you don't have to worry about that. And then obviously if one team wins, the other team loses between the Bills and the Chiefs, it's pretty much decided at that point. So there's a lot of moving parts, and they're having that vote on it today. Nothing's like set in stone, but I don't see a situation where they don't just put this through, because this is the only solution 2 days out from these games happening.
Well, this seems like a pretty good solution to me, even though a couple teams aren't favored with the solution, but like it's good because it doesn't affect the other teams who are not really involved. Yeah, as much like the Ravens weren't really involved in the situation. They're not really getting slighted by a ton. They're still going to get a chance at home field, but they're not getting a chance at the AFC North. But outside of that should be fine because they weren't going to win that game anyway, to be honest.
No, I don't think they would either. Yeah, no.
So
go ahead.
So if you have a Week 18 championship or if you're playing DFS, you might want to know which teams have something to play for. Right. Which teams might rest players, which teams have nothing to play for. So that's the purpose of this next segment here. Okay. So a few teams who have absolutely nothing to play for and are just vying for the best draft spot, right? Meaning that they could play their starters or they might not. They might try to lose, not super intentionally because they don't want to, look like they're losing. But they might want to lose because they're going to get the best potential draft spot. Colts, Texans, right? And they're playing against each other this week. So, whoever loses this game wins. The Falcons, Saints, Panthers. Saints and Panthers are playing each other. The Bears, the Cardinals, the teams that I just mentioned, they're out of the playoffs. They have nothing to play for. They're just vying for the best draft spot. So it's kind of hard to trust these teams. But they're like, so let's look at the first team there, the Colts. There's no one I'd really trust on the Colts this week, right? No. There's no one I'd really trust on the Texans this week. They're playing against each other, right?
That's gonna be
right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
With the Colts, they were bad as with is, the Falcons, even when they were trying. You know what I'm
saying? Were they trying? That was the question. Arthur Smith, for the Falcons, the head coach, he might try and win this game against the Bucs, right? The Bucs are probably not playing their starters. Arthur Smith needs to win games just to kind of like make sure he's not on the hot seat. So I think Tyler Algier is still in play. He needs 100 yards rushing to hit 1,000 yards in the season. So I think that's going to be in play here. Drake London, I think, is still in play as well, right? These guys are potentially going up against backups for the Bucs, so they could potentially have big days.
Yeah, with the Buccaneers, I think they're definitely going to rest starters, obviously, because they have no way to improve their seeding. They're just locked in. They're a 7 seed. It doesn't matter what they do. So they're not going to start, and especially with 45-year-old Tom Brady at quarterback, they're not going to risk him. I think you look at the opposite side of the ball.
Well, the Bucs, the Bucs won the NFC South.
Yes, they did.
So they'll be the 4 seed.
They are the 4 seed regardless. They can't drop out otherwise. They're not going to make it as a wild card. But what I was saying on the other side of the ball with the Falcons, like I said, I alluded to a couple weeks ago with the youth movement in Atlanta. You mentioned Desmond Ridder, Tyler Algier, Drake London. I think they're absolutely in play. And then Arthur Smith too, like you said, to keep himself off the hot seat. I would be surprised if they don't consider getting rid of Arthur Smith, but we'll see how it goes. I think maybe his time could be up if the cards fall the wrong way for him. But I think the young guys, you can definitely start them and be pretty confident, like Desmond Ridder, Tyler Algier, Drake London. I'm okay with that. I think they're going to see what they have. They're fine. It's not like they're contending for anything this season, and they got a long way to go yet, I think. even heading into next season. But I think they're going to use this game, especially against backups, to see what they have. And it could end on a high note for these guys. I think Tyler Algier, like you said, is the safest of them. I wouldn't rule out a big day from Drake London either if Desmond Ridder can get it going in the passing game. And like you said, against backups, I think it's on the table. We see weird things happen in this last, like, it feels like an extra week.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And then Saints Panthers, you know, I think both teams here want to tank, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this game plays out. I think I'm fine rolling DJ Moore out there. I think that's about it in this game. I know that Deontay Foreman needs like more than 100 yards to hit 1,000 yards rushing if he has a big
Yeah.
game. It's possible they try to feed him, but you know, outside of that, you know, I really don't want to trust Alvin Kamara or Chris Olave. You know,
There's no
although I'm sure
reason to
the
try and
Saints will
bang them
want
up.
to get Olave. Yeah, you know, Olave is probably going to try to get to 1,000 yards receiving. You know, it's very feasible, but like he also was coming off that hamstring injury. You know, so I'm not sure if they want to push him as hard, but you know, we'll see. I just it's hard for me to trust these guys this week.
Right. No, you really can't. Not in these games. I don't think. I hate. You know, it's funny because I love the extra week, but I hate the extra week. You know, because this is the type of thing you do. You just stat padding, stat chasing, that a whole thing. There's no way to know who's going to be playing to the hardest extent. I think that DJ Moore is really the only play in this game too. I don't like any of the Saints offense. I haven't for a couple weeks. Even Alvin Kamara. So there's no reason. I'm just kind of keeping my hands off of that game. You can start them in a pinch, but I'm not happy starting anyone from that game.
Okay, cool. The Vikings Bears game is interesting because Justin Fields is out, right? The Bears are out of it. Nathan Peterman gets a start. Can't really trust any Bear in this game. Now, on the Vikings side, they don't have a lot to play for because they're likely going to be the 3 seed regardless of what happens. Like the only way they can become the 2 seed is if the 49ers lose to the Cardinals, which probably isn't happening. You know,
Right.
with that being said, since they have a chance to get the 2 seed, like even if it's a small one, they might play their starters. And you know, because of that possibility against the bad Bears defense, like I think Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson. Like Justin Jefferson is chasing like all types of records, right? And Hawkinson, he can hit 1,000 yards receiving if he has a 100-yard receiving game in this game. So I think they might go after it, honestly, because they have that chance at the 2 seed, which would be a big deal, right? Coming to Minnesota for these games in the playoffs. I think Kirk Cousins doesn't play this week too. You know, I think I'm okay playing the Vikings players this week. You know, in betting, DFS, and in if your championship is in week 18.
I think I'd be okay with that too, because the Bears defense isn't anything to behold. You know, even when they're starting their players or they're not, you know, even the Vikings offense is good enough. I'm okay with starting them too. These types of games, and like I said, I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but I see this kind of thing could be happening in a couple games this week. And I talked to you a little bit about this before the podcast for us, but I said that like they could definitely play a good half of football, you know, and decide to just pull starters and then check the scoreboards, you know, just see if they need to keep playing, something like that. Obviously, it might be a little bit unheard of, but I feel like we could see this kind of thing happen because there's no reason to think that against a bad Bears defense that this Vikings team isn't going to play well. I expect them to go up. They might just build a lead and then just pull everybody and be done. But that building of the lead might be enough to make these fantasy players relevant. And like you said, where you trust the Vikings players, I could see that happening with the Cowboys, maybe with the 49ers, you know, these teams that need a little bit of help, regardless of whether they win or not. I could see them just kind of building that lead against bad teams and then just sitting back and seeing where they sit, maybe partway through the game. I'm not sure if they get that access to see what's going on, but I could see that happening. I think a good half of football is going to be enough to make the players
the
in
access
relevant.
Yeah, the access for the 49ers won't be there because the Vikings play in the early window, 49ers play in the later window. So like the Vikings won't know like what's going on in that 49ers game. And that's a real game that matters for them to see if the 49ers can lose to the Cardinals. But
I don't see that happening.
I'll say this, like about that game, like if you want to like diversify just a little bit in DFS, like I think Alexander Madison can be a little bit of a play here. Like somebody not so obvious. I can see him, you know, getting some work in this game because he's still effective. If he's in the game, you're not really throwing the game, right? But like against the Bears defense, they might not play Dalvin Cook 100% because they got to save him, you know, for the playoffs, obviously. So I think Madison could be in play here this week. in DFS.
And you consider too that the Bears are allowing fourth most fantasy points running backs this season, and obviously everything is subject to change. Some of these
Right.
statistics aren't going to be perfectly accurate because they're going to pull starters. Some people might not be playing. Some people might be injured. They might not be trying as hard, like you said. But it's a good matchup regardless on the ground for Dalvin Cook or Alexander Madison. I think you're right with saying that these guys could see some more playing time. And Madison, he could spell Dalvin Cook. Do you think Dalvin Cook might be in for like? I don't think it's going to be an extremely reduced workload, but do you think he can reach over 15 carries in this game, Dalvin Cook?
I think so. I think it's still possible. I would depend on efficiency though, like maybe a touchdown, but I
Right.
wouldn't expect like a monster performance this week.
So if
But
you
it
if you
is
were
the Bears.
playing, yeah, if you were playing like the higher lower for underdog, and the line came out and it was over under 14, 15 carries, like would you be taking the higher or lower?
I'll probably take the under on that.
I would take the lower too. I think that's just a
Yeah.
safer bet. Like I could totally see Dalvin Cook mixing in, I mean, pretty much like I think 10 carries is where I kind of see him.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense. Now as far as the Cardinals against the 49ers, like, they're obviously out of it. DeAndre Hopkins is not playing. Marquise Brown, I guess he's in play. Greg Dortch is in play. James Conner isn't practicing yet this week, so I'm not sure if he does end up playing. I'm not sure how much I trust him this week either.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Also in this 49ers Cardinals game, Christian McCaffrey might be out. So, there's no reason to really force him to come back this week. Like, I'm sure the ankle injury isn't that bad, but they're just taking it easy on him because they're going to need him in the playoffs. Elijah
Yeah.
Mitchell might be back this week. So, he would be the guy I play if he's back. Otherwise, probably Jordan Mason over Tyrion Davis-Price after last week's go-ahead touchdown. I would probably go Jordan Mason over TDP if I were to choose one. I would still think it's somewhat of a committee if Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell are out, but I think I'll prefer Mason by a hair over TDP.
For me, I'm kind of so Brandon Ayuk. I want to be like happy and say that he's going to play and he's going to get the numbers that you need. And he hasn't been like a mainstay in your lineup. Probably you've been questioning whether or not to start him. The past couple of weeks because he had that rough target share at first when Brock Purdy came back, but he came back and had that good game last week. I'm not sure how much I trust him this week. I don't think that they're going to be throwing the ball a whole lot. If this game does end up being close, I don't think it's going to be. Maybe he can have some relevance. I don't think it's going to be a close game. This might be a ground and pound. He might be good, Brandon Ayuk, if he plays for a little bit for a touchdown. That might be about it. I'm not seeing a whole lot of ceiling like he had last week. The 26-point ceiling isn't going to be there. I see him kind of capping out at 15, 16, just a couple catches in PPR even. So I think that Brandon Ayuk, I'm not trusting him. That's best case scenario for me if he lands in the teens for fantasy points. I think it's going to be a quiet day for the receivers, at least this week, in week 18 for the 49ers.
Yeah, I can see it. I still like him in this game. I mean, the target shares the last two games have been absolutely ridiculous, almost 40% for Brandon Ayuk. So I can see, if Brock Purdy throws, more than 25, maybe 30 passes, I can see Ayuk having a pretty good day. So, he would be in lineups in my week 18 championship, and he would be a potential DFS play as well with somebody who has he can blow up, especially in full PPR. Okay, so let's move on to teams who will potentially play spoiler and play starters for the whole game.
Should
The
we start
Raiders
with
against
your
the
team?
Chiefs.
Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. I think Raiders against the Chiefs for sure. Jets against the Dolphins. Rams against the Seahawks, and the Commanders against the Cowboys. I think those four teams want to play spoiler this week.
Yeah.
I'm cool with playing Garrett Wilson against the Dolphins with Mike White at quarterback. That's about it for the Jets, though. They do want to spoil the Dolphins' playoff hopes for sure. The Raiders, they probably want to try and win this game, right? Josh McDaniels, he needs wins right now, right? And Devontae Adams, he can also reach 1,500 receiving yards with a decent game. So I'm good playing him against the Chiefs team who, the Chiefs are trying to win this game, man. They're going to, they want that one seed. So, he's going to be there. Josh Jacobs hasn't practiced yet this week. I'm assuming he'll be out there just like he has all year, even though he's been banged up. Probably wants to protect the rushing title as well and not let any other running back catch up to him. And the Raiders have zero reason to care about an injury since he's gone after this year. So I'm good playing my Raiders this week.
Yeah, these spoiler teams are the ones that are like the best as far as reliability when it comes to this week of the fantasy season. You're looking at teams that are definitely going to be playing all their starters. I think he hit the nail on the head with this one. And Jarrett Stidham, the Raiders took him down to the wire with Derek Carr quarterback. I'm not saying Derek Carr was obviously playing better football at that time, but the Raiders have it in them to keep this game close. It's not like the Chiefs are just going to walk in, trounce them, and walk out. Especially with the way Devontae Adams is playing. He had that big game last week after a couple of cold spell games, the weeks before that. But Jarrett Stidham should keep him close. I think the offense looked really good last week. It could be a high-scoring affair, and like you said, there's no reason for either of these teams to just kind of let off the gas at this point. And you mentioned Josh Jacobs. I think he's pretty much a lock to play, and we've been saying this all season. The Raiders are going to try and squeeze every ounce of value they can get out of him with him being gone. So he's going to be playing regardless, I think. I'm not worried about his status at all. So I think you can definitely start all the Raiders and Chiefs in this game. I agree with you.
Yeah. And then the Rams against the Seahawks. Like, I'm cool playing Cam Akers in this game. I'm cool playing Tyler Higbee. Both have great matchups, but the Seahawks, this is a division game. Remember, like Jets Dolphins division game, Raiders Chiefs division
They're
game.
all
Like, they don't
division
want
games,
they don't want their guys, those other teams to have an advantage in the playoffs or make the playoffs even. And
Right.
if the Jets win, the Dolphins are most likely out of the playoffs. If the Rams win against the Seahawks are out of the playoffs, right?
Right.
So it's huge, right? If the Seahawks lose, then it's really up between the Packers and the Lions to see who wins and makes it to the playoffs. But both Cam Akers and Tyler Higbee have great matchups. The Seahawks, will go hard to play all their starters, obviously, because they want to make it to the playoffs. That's a good thing for the Rams.
Yeah.
So Tyler Higbee needs to hit 600 receiving yards to unlock an extra $500,000 in his contract. That's only about 13 more receiving yards, whatever. But I'm sure, he'll get that in this game. And more potentially because he's been getting a higher target share. The Seahawks, are in the playoffs if they win. The Packers lose on Sunday night. So if the Packers win on Sunday night, they're in, and the Seahawks and Lions are out. Right? The Lions are in if they win on Sunday night and the Rams beat the Seahawks. So this is all for that last wild card playoff spot in the NFC.
Yeah, this is the playoff triangle with these three teams for the NFC. Like, there's all that drama going on over in the AFC between the AFC North champion and, with everything that happened with the game cancellation and then the top seed in the AFC. But the drama over in the NFC is between the Packers, the Seahawks, and the Lions. And the Packers have the best chance to make the playoffs of them all because they just need to win. They're in. They don't need any help. If they win, they're in, and that's the way it goes. But yeah, all these teams are going to be playing their players. Like I said, with the Rams, I agree. Tyler Higbee, he should have a good game. He's been a favorite target of Baker Mayfield's. And we see this kind of thing happen a lot, like you said, with the incentives. People have incentives in their contracts, and they're only a little bit off. We saw that, I think was it last year or 2 years ago, that Russell Wilson helped Tyler Lockett hit his because he just targeted him at the end of the game for him to get those receptions, and he got that incentive. So those kind of weird things can happen and actually boost up fantasy performances, so definitely keep an eye out for them. But like you said, I think the Packers, they're a safe bet. They're definitely going to be playing all their starters. The Lions, all of them, they're all competing for the playoffs. There's no reason not to. And like you said, with the division rivalries going on, there's no love lost, in these games. They're definitely going to be playing as hard as they can, trying to keep each other out of the playoffs.
And we were talking about that Packers-Lions game. I really like Jared Goff this week. Sportsbooks have his over-under passing touchdown prop set at 1.5 passing touchdowns at like plus 120 on the over. So like, even if the Seahawks end up winning earlier in the day, like I really like the over on that regardless. And the over, at plus 120, I'm taking that all day long. He's thrown at least 2 touchdowns in 5 of his last 6 games, and that 6th game was against the Jets. So, no issues there. And Preciser has this game at a 49-point total with the 1-point spread. So I think Goff can get it done pretty easily there.
Yeah, so I like Goff too. Everything screams good on paper for Jared Goff, but the thing is, I saw a stat somewhere, and it's really odd because it's almost like the Amari Cooper stat, home versus away. Jared Goff is a much different quarterback indoors than he is outdoors, and this game's being played in Green Bay at night, so it's going to be cold. I'm not sure. It's obviously like I think that the game script could lend itself to Jared Goff throwing over that 1.5 touchdown prop, but I think that him being outside, he throws much fewer touchdowns outside than he does inside. I think the numbers were like 27 indoors to like 9 outdoors, and he has more interceptions in those games. It's just ridiculous. It's like one of those Amari Cooper stats. So just something to keep in mind. I was looking at Jared Goff too going in this week. I was like, man, this would be a really good matchup, between the Packers and Lions. It's probably gonna be the highest, one of the higher over unders, maybe even on Precise or that kind of thing. I didn't get a chance to look at them, but 100%. I think it seems like an easy pick, but for me, I might just be tempted. I'm not saying you should take the lower, but it could easily be a lower touchdown output than you think, just looking at it on paper.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, he threw for 3 touchdowns in Carolina 2 weeks ago, 355 passing yards. So maybe he's over it. That's the hope.
Maybe. We'll see. We saw Amari Cooper do that. What was it? He had an all right game with Deshaun Watson.
Last week.
Maybe these things just kind of come and go, but it's an interesting trend. They always show it. I think I've seen it the past couple of weeks for Jared Goff. They show it on like the Fox graphics when they throw it up in the game.
So Sam Howell is going to be playing and starting for the Commanders this week because his friend Taylor Heineke, such a nice guy, handing him the starting job this week. Ron Rivera's gone, most likely after this game.
Yeah.
Most likely the Cowboys, won't be winning the NFC East. They have a small chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tony Pollard's practicing in full. I think the Cowboys are going to play their starters.
Yeah, they're going to. And maybe not Tony Pollard. I mean, we'll see. He might be on a snap count. They might kind of just ease him into the game, give him a light workload because he is banged up a little bit. And we saw that the Cowboys offense didn't really look the same last week without Tony Pollard. So they need him for the playoffs. They might just kind of let off. But I think they're definitely going to be starting, the CeeDee Lambs and the Dalton Schultzes and, the Dak Prescotts. They're not going to have any trouble with that. The Cowboys have a history. They don't usually rest starters. The last time they rested starters was Dak's rookie year. Since then, even when they were in the playoffs back in 2018, they were in the playoffs comfortably. They couldn't improve their seeding. They played a game down to the wire against the Giants and had huge fantasy days in that game. Michael Gallup went for 2 touchdowns, that kind of thing. It was a big day. Dak Prescott threw for 4, I think it was. So they have a history of, going and playing all the way down the wire in these games. So I think this is definitely a chance. And if they have that opportunity, like you said, to claim the NFC East, even though it is a small chance, I think they're going to be playing their starters, definitely. And obviously, like Washington, too, they're going to be playing. I think Sam Howell is going to be interesting. I want to see how he plays and who he targets, who he looks for in the passing game. If he looks any kind of good, they could hold on to him and roll into next season with him, assuming they don't take a quarterback.
I can totally see it. It. Sam Howell being their starting quarterback next year. Keep in mind for Washington, Brian Robinson has a knee injury. He hasn't practiced at all this week yet. Antonio Gibson's on IR, so Jonathan Williams is in play, potentially in a 3-down role. So if you're looking for a cheap DFS target, or if you're looking for somebody, under the radar, potentially on waivers in your 18-week league, week 18 championship, Jonathan Williams is somebody to pick up and play.
Right.
Let's see. All right, so these are the teams who will most likely be resting their starters because they have no reason to play them. Giants, number 1, they already locked up their 6th seed. They have nothing to play for against the Eagles. The Eagles are definitely vying for the 1 seed. The Eagles are going to play their starters. They're favored by 14 points. So it looks like the Eagles are playing their starters against the Giants backups. That's pretty much what's happening here. So it looks like Vegas is expecting that to play out. So definitely play all of your Eagles. Starters against backups in this game potentially. So that's like the most ideal scenario. And the Bucks too, they already locked up the NFC South and the 4 seed, so they had nothing to play for against the Falcons, most likely resting their guys. I think any team I didn't mention is probably playing their starters. Okay.
Right.
Or at least projected to play their starters for the entire game. So if I didn't mention the team, most likely they're going to play their guys.
The Giants and Buccaneers the Giants and Buccaneers are the 2 that you're really looking at that, they're not going to be playing their starters. There's no really chance of them having those guys come in. But I think outside of that, like, there are games to be played. I think you look at the teams like, obviously that don't have a shot of going very many places, but, we'll still have an outside chance. I'm looking at like the Steelers, the Patriots could sneak in. I think you look at them, those guys are definitely going to be playing regardless because it is still the game. We've seen this happen a couple of times. I know I think it was last season that everybody was up in arms about the Eagles letting the 1 game go, not playing and being competitive. The Giants, especially, because they needed them to win for them to have a chance at the playoffs. But I remember that happened. So I think in the spirit of the game, we're going to see a lot of these teams just kind of, be competitive. At least I think 3/4 of the way through, if not all the way through.
Yeah. I don't want to play anybody on the Giants. Like if they're going to be playing their backups against the starters, I don't want to play anybody. But On the Bucks side, like I think I might be okay playing someone like Keyshawn Vaughn, like in DFS, because I'm
Mhm.
assuming they would bench for both Rashad White and Leonard Fournette. He's a possibility, and that's really about it. Like I don't want to trust any receivers or anything like that. But Keyshawn Vaughn might walk into some opportunity this week as a dart throw DFS cheap play.
Right, because he's the clear running back behind those two, and he doesn't get
Yeah,
a
I
whole
would say
lot
so.
of time. But we've seen Keyshawn Vaughn, have a couple, boom games over his career. Obviously, they're few and far between. But I remember, I think it was last year where he had a big game with Leonard Fournette even playing. So just keep him in mind, like you said.
Yeah, I think like the cheap dart throw running backs this week are probably Keyshawn Vaughn. Um, a shot in the dark would be Alexander
Jonathan
Madison
Williams,
and then
like you said.
Jonathan Williams. Yeah, I think those would be the three guys. Um, let's see. A few like okay, let's talk about a couple matchups if you have any, Zach, that
Yeah,
that we really like this week. I'll just throw one out there for myself, and that's Zay Jones against the Titans
yeah,
this
I
week.
had him. Yep.
Is you okay? Good.
Yeah.
Christian Kirk is an okay play too. I like Zay better in this one against Tennessee's perimeter defense. He also has some incentives, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. Yeah, he needs 2 receptions to get 80 catches for the year, and he
Hmm.
needs 98 yards to get 900 catches, and that would give him an extra $750,000 this year. So I'm sure that the good matchup plus Trevor Lawrence, knowing that for a fact, is going to
Yeah.
put up a lot of targets towards Zay Jones' direction. That's a good matchup, and the prop this week I think is only at like 52.5 or something like that receiving prop,
That's really low.
and the anytime touchdown is good odds too. Let me just quickly, if you have anything else to say about Zay Jones, please go
Yeah.
ahead. But I'll look for that in the meantime.
Yeah, I said welcome
So,
back, Zay Jones. Go ahead. Do
oh
you
yeah,
have it?
100%. Yeah, I do. Zay Jones, plus 180 anytime touchdown, which is awesome. Christian Kirk is
Yeah.
at plus 155. Yeah, 52.5 at minus 130 in terms of his receiving total. So I like that, man. The Titans in
Yeah.
week 14, he put up 8 for 77 and a touchdown.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. He had a really tough 2 game stretch featuring matchups against the Jets and the Texans, who are allowing the second and fourth least fantasy points to receivers this season, respectively. Now he's turning around and he's playing against, I think it's the worst defense against receivers. The best matchup in terms of fantasy points allowed. It's the Titans. In their last matchup 4 weeks ago, like you said, he had that big game. He finished as a PPR wide receiver 8. I'm expecting him to bounce right back in the regular season finale. This is one of those games where we don't have too many of them this week, where there are no extraneous circumstances. It's just a football game. It's a competitive football game. There's nothing like, oh, we can sit back and we don't have to worry about our seeding. No, both of these teams need to win. It's a win and you're in situation for both of these teams. This is what everyone has been waiting for the past 2 weeks. The Titans just got rolled by the Cowboys and the Jaguars just rolled the Texans. So I think the Jaguars can win this game. They have a good shot of having a huge game on offense. I'm hoping it's competitive because, like I said, there aren't a whole lot of games where it's just like, a regular old football game. These just, going back and forth and trying to win the game in this week 18. So I like Zay Jones a whole lot this week. It's funny. He's one of the more obvious ones, I think, that we have this week as far as a good matchup.
Who else you got?
I'm pretty much firing up everybody on the Packers. They're facing a Lions team that's allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the third most points to receivers. In a winning January game, I like Aaron Rodgers to turn things up a notch while he's defending his home turf. Christian Watson's been limited, but I do expect him to play regardless in an important matchup. I wouldn't be worried about starting Lazard or Doubs either. Doubs is more of an upside flex play for me than Lazard. He checks in as a wide receiver 3, but I'm not worried about this team at all. In terms of fantasy, they're at home. They've been doing much better these past few weeks. I'm starting everybody, pretty much against the Lions because they're not a good team on paper when it comes down to allowing fantasy points. And I expect this to be a good game regardless. We talked about this game having maybe potentially a high over under, and it's going to be a high scoring game.
I like it. I like it. What else you got?
So the other one that I really liked, the Jets. Obviously, like I said, I alluded to them earlier when we talked about teams trying to play spoiler. Mike White, he's playing against a really good matchup. The Dolphins are allowing the second most fantasy points to QBs this season. I think regardless of how this game goes, he's going to be doing his thing. He's had a couple bad games, which is to be expected. He came out hot out of the gate, slowed down a
Before
little
you
bit,
go
but
on,
I think
before you go on, I'm sorry to say this, Zach. I'm sorry to say this, but it will not be Mike White against the Dolphins this week. It's going to be Joe Flacco.
Man, did I miss that? Did I miss that report?
It just came out. Like it just got tweeted a few minutes ago
Like
by
just
Adam
now?
Schefter.
No.
Yep, about half an hour. Joe Flacco started this week.
Okay.
Zach
Well,
Wilson would be the number 2, and then Mike White is out. So Zach Wilson is going to be active.
this
Not something I saw coming here.
No. Okay. It's still manageable if it's Joe Flacco. All right, because he has the passing volume. I like Joe Flacco more than I like Zach Wilson, but he's not as much as Mike White.
Me too.
Okay. Now I'm not.
I'll
really
say this
happy
though.
about we'll see.
Garrett Wilson. I'll still start him. I'll still start him, but I'll say this about his receiving props and stuff. Like wait on this to shift, and wait for because the odds are going to go down, right? And you're going to get better deals. The deals are coming.
Okay.
For Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm okay.
Maybe a blessing in disguise.
I would assume that like his over under is probably going to be around 49.5 against the Dolphins this week, and I would take the over.
Yeah. Okay. So
I would say.
Yeah, like I said, I don't mind Joe Flacco because when he's in, it's a pass heavy offense. So I'm okay with Garrett Wilson. I think, even if it's Joe Flacco. I was all excited to start Mike White though, because I look at the fantasy matchup; it's perfect for quarterbacks. The Dolphins are allowing a lot of points. So now we'll see how it goes. I'm not very confident starting Joe Flacco. If he's going to be having a good game, it's going to have to come pretty much exclusively through the air. He is not a mobile quarterback, so I think that we have to leave. I don't even know where I'd rank Joe Flacco. You think he's like a mid to high QB2 in a good matchup? I feel like he could be. Just the way that the way the game script is going
maybe
to be.
Mid, maybe mid QB2.
Okay, so this is why it's going to be a competitive game, quote unquote, because the Dolphins, they need to get.
I'm sure it's going to be super competitive between Joe Flacco and Skylar Thompson. Like Scott, I can't wait to see this game. It's going to be
no. I think he could finish. I think he could finish mid to high as a QB2 at the end of the week when all the dust settles, because we could see quarterbacks coming in and out of the game and the rotation. Right. Okay, we have our lead built up. We'll pull Brock Purdy. We have our lead built up. We'll pull Dak Prescott. We have our lead built up. We'll pull Jalen Hurts. Like, I think that could contribute to, some deflated numbers across the board, and he could end up being a high QB2 if it falls that way.
Okay. I could see it. I can see him finishing there.
Yeah.
You have anybody else for this week?
It's really tough going through, and trying to pick these guys out. I don't really have anybody else that stands out to me. Those are the guys that stood out to me that I like personally. Obviously, there are a bunch of matchups, but you don't know who's going to be playing when. Obviously,
and are they playing against backups? Are the backups playing against starters? This is a tough week, man, and this is why we don't have our fantasy championships in week 18 and the last week of the regular season. This is why.
With the week 18 fantasy championship, do you think there might have been a couple managers out there who have that week 18 fantasy championship who are having like vindication because there's a second week of fantasy championship, games or whatever going on? Like, I know in my one league, I have a 2-week fantasy championship. It goes from 17 to 18. And the manager in that league, the commissioner was like, yes, this is like kind of vindication for me. Because even though this Monday night game, it got canceled and other people's championships are hinging on it, this week 18 matchup, it still has to happen. We have a whole week of games yet to play to decide the champion. And that kind of made it easy for them to decide who was going to be their champion, in their league, because they had that whole extra week to lean on.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, but expect the scoring to be all wonky though. Like it's going to be all over the place. The guys you expect to do well aren't, in the opposite, right? So, but yeah, all right. So I think that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Really, really pumped to hear the news on Damar Hamlin. That's awesome. Hopefully we can continue to hear, good news as the weekend rolls through. Dude, he's addressing the team via FaceTime. That's insane, dude. These guys must be so pumped. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like for this,
you better bet they're gonna be playing hard now through the playoffs.
Oh my god, hell yeah.
How are you gonna feel if you have to face the Bills? Like, how are you gonna say, yeah, we're gonna beat you?
Right. I know.
Like,
I know.
You gotta feel it's a tough game. The same like when it originally happened, this injury, like when I was thinking about it before all this information came out and they called it no contest, I was like, as the Bengals, do you just like cordially concede? Like, it didn't affect the playoffs regardless of who won that game. Like, I know they talked about, like, it didn't affect who won the game. Regardless of who won the game, it wouldn't affect who was in the playoffs or who was out. Like, the Bengals could have been in a position to do that. It was just an interesting thought that crossed my mind. Like, you could just let that game go.
Yeah. No, yeah, I guess, it depends. Like, I guess they were just leaving it up to the NFL to see what they would decide. So,
Yeah. That's the
um,
best way to play it, but yeah, it was just something that crossed my mind. I thought it was interesting.
sure. Yeah, guys. So have a great weekend. I hope this helped a little bit just to kind of clarify like how these situations are going to be looking like going into week 18. And yeah, we'll see you guys back on Monday. There's no Monday night football game. So on Monday, we're going to kind of review all the games. And we'll obviously start getting into some, looking back and recapping, the fantasy season, in
Yeah.
2022. And we'll start to get through all of that, as we move forward. So, we're not ending, the content cycle by any means. We're going to continue to like provide you guys, with useful information and all that, getting into the NFL playoffs and free agency and then the draft. So we have a lot going on in the offseason. All right. So we hope that you guys can continue to stick with us throughout it all. And we'll be back on Monday. We'll talk to you guys then. See you later. Bye bye.